Good evening and welcome to CYC News for the 24th of July 2016 and the 17th of Abib 1732 AM. I'm Daniel Noor. In today's headlines, tragic incidents occurred in Upper Egypt. His Holiness Pope Tawadros II offers his condolences to the French president. A detailed report about the failed coup in Turkey. The US and Russia talk about Syria coordination campaigns despite Pentagon concern. The Syrian army takes a main road into rebel-held areas of Aleppo. 10 arrested for plotting terror in the lead-up to the Brazil Olympics. And a health breakthrough. A developing Chlamydia vaccine shows potential. First up, in Egypt, there have been a string of tragic incidents. On Friday, July the 15th, a group of extremists attacked the houses of the Coptic people in Abu Qurqas village in El Minya in Upper Egypt. This is based on a rumour that a church is being built in the village, which has been proven to be false. The assaults resulted in the destruction of 5 Coptic houses. The security forces arrived after the houses were already destroyed, according to a statement issued by His Grace Bishop Macarius, General Bishop of El Minya and Abu Qurqas Diocese. Bishop Macarius said, "We have expressed our suffering to all officials and still ask for the ruling of the law." On Saturday, July the 16th, a fire broke out in the Church of the Archangel Michael in the village of Luxor in 3 AM, local time. The police arrived at the church at 4 AM after the church contents were completely destroyed. The police are holding the investigations necessary to establish the cause of the fire. This church was established in 1980 and was renovated several times. The church serves 520 Coptic families in the village, according to a statement released by His Grace Yusab, General Bishop of Luxor. On Sunday, July the 17th, 2016, His Grace Bishop Macarius, General Bishop of El Minya and Abu Qurqas Diocese, Upper Egypt, visited the injured people in the hospital of Samalut to check on them after being exposed to an attack. The Diocese of El Minya issued a statement telling that 2 families and 2 priests, or rather 2 families of 2 priests who served it, were exposed to an attack by clubs and cold weapons, resulting in the death of 1 of the members and the injury of 3 others. On Wednesday, July the 20th, His Holiness Pope Tawadros II went to the Church of St. Mary El Muallaka in Old Cairo to give his weekly sermon there. Instead of his usual sermon, His Holiness said, "On the occasion of those tragic incidents that took place in the last few days, I've personally followed up with the officials, intending for the full extent of the law to be carried out with justice. Let's pray for our beloved Egypt, for every martyr and every injured person. Let's pray to God so that He may bring us back to the original Egyptian spirit. I therefore dedicate this day specifically to these prayers." On Saturday, July the 16th, His Holiness Pope Tawadros II and the Holy Synod of the Coptic Orthodox Church expressed their condemnation of the terror attacks that took place in the French city of Nice by sending letters to the French President, François Hollande. His Holiness expressed sorrow for the killed and injured people who died during the attack. He assured his support to their families and prayed for them that God would bring justice and comfort and peace to the entire world. And now on to a detailed report about the attempted coup in Turkey. Late Friday, tanks rolled onto the streets of the capital Ankara and Istanbul. Uniformed soldiers blocked the famous Bosphorus Bridge connecting the European and Asian sides of the ancient city of Istanbul. Media outlets, including CNN Turk, said they'd been forced off the air, and social media experienced outages. Shortly before midnight local time, a faction of the military issued a statement saying, "The political administration that has lost all legitimacy has been forced to withdraw." President Recep Tayyip Erdogan addressed the nation via FaceTime. Speaking to a CNN Turk anchor who held her phone so viewers could see it, he urged people to take to the streets to stand up to the military faction behind the uprising. "Go to the streets and give them their answer," Erdogan said. Within a few hours, during which gunshots were heard at the presidential palace, The Turkish National Intelligence Unit claimed the coup was over, but not before 290 people were killed and more than 1,400 people were injured. 2 days after a failed military coup, Erdogan vowed a continued crackdown on those behind it, and those perceived to have been involved, as large crowds heeded his call to fill the nation's streets. Thousands of soldiers have been arrested and hundreds of judiciary members removed since Friday's uprising, in a chaotic night of violence. Around 6,000 people have been detained and arrests will continue, according to Turkey's foreign ministry. Prime Minister Binali Yildirim has vowed that they will pay a heavy price. Erdogan said that he will remove the viruses from all state institutions. The arrests include General Bekir Erkan Van, commander of the Incirlik Air Base, according to the Turkish President's office. The United States uses the airbase to launch airstrikes on ISIS in Syria and Iraq. According to Anadolu, an order of detention for Colonel Ali Yazisi, a senior military aide to Erdogan, has also been issued. 8 Turkish soldiers flew to a helicopter to Alexandroupoli, Greece, hours after the failed coup attempt, where they were arrested and charged with so-called illegal entrance into Greece. Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras said they would be extradited within 15 to 20 days. According to an anonymous source, clashes occurred on Sunday between security forces and coup plotters resisting arrest, nearly 200 miles south of Ankara at Konya Air Base. The government is now in control of the situation. Erdogan attended a funeral on Sunday held for some of those killed during gunfire, including the brother of his chief advisor, Mustafa Varank. He also said he did not rule out bringing back the death penalty for the coup's perpetrators. As the crowd chanted, "We want the death penalty," he said that they can't ignore the people's request in a democracy and that this is their right. Turkey has formally requested the extradition of cleric Fethullah Gulen from the United States. President Erdogan blames Gulen, a long-time bitter rival, for the attempted coup. Erdogan told CNN that the extradition request was coming soon. Prime Minister Binali Yildirim announced the request in Parliament and on Twitter, referring to Gulen as a terrorist leader. The Muslim cleric, living in self-imposed exile in Pennsylvania, has denied any involvement in the coup attempt. In other news, a US proposal to deepen military cooperation with Russia in Syria has sparked a rift at the highest levels of the Obama administration, with the Pentagon openly challenging an idea that the top US diplomat calls critical to moving Syria forward. Secretary of State John Kerry is in Moscow negotiating a possible agreement that could lead to the US sharing classified intelligence with Russia over military strikes. Both countries are involved in conducting the strikes in Syria. However, the Pentagon is making it clear that Defense Secretary Ash Carter remains skeptical of Russian military activities in the war-torn country. Both the US and Russia have aircraft that conduct operations over Syria, and the new agreement could allow for the targeting and carrying out of joint airstrikes against ISIS and al-Nusra, the al-Qaeda branch in Syria. The Pentagon Press Secretary, Peter Cook, told reporters on Thursday the Secretary of Defense has been clear that he has been skeptical of Russia's activities in Syria, and we have plenty of reasons for that. And I think he maintains that skepticism. The Pentagon is strongly signaling that whenever agreements are reached, the Defense Department wants to see the guarantees Moscow will live up to its part of the bargain. Cook said that if Russia can behave in a more positive fashion, he would be open to that conversation. But Kerry is pressing ahead. In Syria, the Syrian army and pro-government forces have taken control of the main road leading into rebel-held areas in Aleppo, effectively cutting off the rebels' main supply route. Aleppo has been a major battlefield in Syria since 2010, with fierce fighting between rebel groups and regime forces. Castello Road, the only route into the city's east, is now mostly in government hands, with pro-rebel neighbourhoods in eastern Aleppo completely besieged. The monitoring group told CNN that the road has been under constant bombardment from forces loyal to President Bashar al-Assad's government. Aleppo has seen many of its neighbourhoods come under fire for 80 consecutive days, with more than 6,000 people, mainly civilians, killed or injured. According to the UK-based information office SOHR, the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, rebel-held areas in the east of the city have come under sustained attack by regime artillery and airstrikes, while rebel and Islamic factions have shelled regime-controlled areas in western neighbourhoods. Syria has witnessed a number of ceasefires come and go over the past few months. Despite Russia's willingness to support the Assad regime militarily, Moscow and Washington have been working together to push for a cessation in the violence in Aleppo and surrounding areas. Brazilian police have arrested 10 members of a group alleged to be preparing acts of terrorism 2 weeks before the start of the Olympic Games. Officials said they were not members of the so-called Islamic State, but had tried to make contact with the group. The Justice Minister said the group was in the planning stage of an attack, and police acted as a preventative measure. Alexandre Moraes described the cell as absolute amateurs and ill-prepared to launch an attack. All those arrested were Brazilian, and 2 more suspects were being sought. They were detained across 10 different states and had been in contact via messaging services such as WhatsApp. Group members had attempted to contact a weapons supplier in neighbouring Paraguay to obtain AK-47 assault rifles, but there was no evidence of any being bought. An emergency meeting of the Brazilian cabinet has been called. More than 80,000 police and soldiers will patrol Rio's streets for the Games, which end on the 21st of August. The federal government said last week that it was releasing an extra $24 million to beef up security ahead of the Olympics. The International Olympic Committee recently concluded that Rio de Janeiro had overcome setbacks and was ready to welcome the world. There have been fears over Rio's readiness because of building delays, the Zika virus and political crises. However, Mr. Moraes told a news conference that there was minimal probability of a terrorist attack during the Rio Olympics. And to our final story, Canadian scientists have developed a promising vaccine against chlamydia. Research published in the journal Vaccine shows that mice given the immunisation are more likely to fight off the infection. Chlamydia is one of the most common sexually transmitted infections in the UK and globally. There is currently no vaccine approved for human use. A team of researchers at McMaster University in Ontario gave mice 2 doses of the prototype vaccine delivered through the nose. When the animals were later exposed to chlamydia, vaccinated mice had fewer copies of the bacteria replicating in their systems. Mice in the vaccinated group also had fewer signs of damage to their reproductive organs. Professor James Mahoney described the results as very promising. He added, "We will trial the vaccine on other animal models before moving on to human trials." Researchers hope their vaccine will also work against chlamydia infections of the eye, a common cause of blindness in developing countries. Meanwhile, figures released by Public Health England suggest chlamydia was the most commonly sexually transmitted infection of the last year. There were more than 200,000 diagnoses of chlamydia in 2015, with 129,000 among young people aged 15 to 24 years. The infection is most commonly passed on through sexual contact, but often people do not notice any symptoms. However, if not treated with antibiotics early on, the bug can lead to long-term health issues, such as pelvic inflammatory disease and infertility. Public Health England says anyone under 25 who is sexually active should be tested for chlamydia every year and if they change partners. And that's all for CYC News. A reminder, you can watch this news bulletin again throughout the week on YouTube. I'm Daniel Noor from the CYC News studios in Sydney, Australia. Have a good night.